Thank you very much, Kim Ho. I'm struck by how, in his sharing, we can feel a kind of complexity and an intricacy now of the elements that are in our dialogue, because we started off by inquiring the interaction between voice and instrument, and how in Professor Xiu's presentation it was about how the instruments became a kind of improvisatory bed of support for the melody and the musical experience led by the voice and the text. And then in Teju's musical phenomenon, we see that different voices actually refer back to each other and filter through to each other through the text and through the interactive practice of learning to sing together, which was continued very beautifully, I think, by Kim Ho's meditation, really, about how how we can speak of a kind of agency in the material itself and in the manual communion with the material bodies of the instruments, and seeing how our traditions of home and of practice are embedded in the movements that we engage in these material fragments of our practice. So very excited now to go over to Professor John Winzenburg, who is actually visiting us in Lingnan for the first time, I think, in a long time. Or ever. So I find that I've just been looking very briefly at the remarkable work that Professor John has done, both as a composer, a conductor, and a scholar. And we're very privileged today to hear how all these different threads of his work have come together in his own project of negotiating and reconstructing cultural difference through choral music. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. I should make one quick correction. I'm not a composer. It's okay, but conductor and scholar and teacher that I'll deal with here. And I'm delighted to be here at Lingnan and to see Xiu from afar as well. He and I were on our first panel together, I think 15 or 16 years ago. He maybe forgets that from Atlanta a long time ago. Today I'm going to follow on these very fascinating presentations by specifically addressing choral voice and cultural difference in practice as research. And to kind of get us started, I would like to frame my presentation with a short excerpt from a piece in Mandarin that I and my group premiered in 2015, which is entitled Shui Guang Lian Nian, which translates to Ripples Glisten Away. We commissioned this and premiered it in Mandarin, and in it you're going to hear some techniques that are specific by the composer. This is a very famous ancient Chinese poem, and it is meant to depict the drunken state of the poet here. And so there are going to be some special techniques that are added to our normal Western choral singing. In the excerpt that we will hear some accented grace notes and some weighted portamentos that are rather unusual in choral singing. You'll hear them sing Yu ba xi zi, Yu ba xi hu bi xi zi, which is rather unusual. This will come up in the middle of the piece that I will begin right here. I won't get into this today, but we are all framing our presentations along the lines of practice as research, which specifically involves research in which practice is a key method of inquiry and comprises a substantial output. And so I want to talk a little bit about the different ways that this may contrast with some of the other research forms that we're accustomed to. We all engage in lots of different types of research. I'm and non-traditional types. My traditional or text-based research involves musical hybridization in pre-1949 Shanghai, and also I research Chinese Western fusion concertos for the Western orchestra and Chinese solo instruments. But my practice as research more specifically involves modern Chinese choral music and more recently contemporary choral theater. And my story in getting involved in this is really driven by the teaching and learning needs and the cultural context. University in 2008, and I was leading the choirs. I immediately faced some very serious questions. First, how can I raise the artistic standard of HKBU groups that I work with enough to represent the university in the community? In other words, how to make us better, and so that we could actually be heard publicly. Secondly, though, was equally important as I experienced my work with them, how can HKBU student choral groups embody the unique identity and character of Hong Kong in our ensemble activities? And then how can I use my own background in music and in East Asian studies, having long studied Mandarin, Japanese, etc. And so I set about forming my group, the Cantoria Hong Kong, in 2009, which is comprised of all music majors, about 1/3 are voice majors, as a smaller and relatively select group that we could then use to develop for a wider scope of artistic projects. Now, the journey that we've had to take there involves a certain blending. And for those of you who may be familiar with Western art music and singing and opera, we first had to set about developing our skills with Western bel canto-based singing. And bel canto is the term that's used for Italian beautiful singing. It's what you hear when you hear Italian opera, but it's also in Western art music and also for Western choral music. But then from through that process, we've also been adding in elements of Chinese choral music. And in addition to the practice itself of learning and performing the repertoire, we've really been dealing with some more specific questions that involve our Hong Kong student ensemble as well. And so as we've added Chinese choral music, it's issues dealing with the Hong Kong ensemble in dialogue with Chinese languages, regions, and styles involving mainland China, Taiwan, Singapore, the diaspora, singing in Mandarin and in other dialects, and bridging Chinese choral music with international choirs and non-Chinese audiences. And specifically in our approach, then we are blending Western bel canto and various indigenous practices through our work. Now, key to this effort has been the development of the Chinese choral anthology, Half Moon Rising, choral music from mainland China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan, which I compiled and edited in 2014 and 15, along with the accompanying CD for that project there. And much of these works were developed from the works that we had been performing. And so this is what forms what I regard as the teaching, research, and impact nexus, all involving practice as research, because our student groups provided 20 of the 24 recorded tracks for this CD, which was then distributed internationally. You can see the one that we just played a little while ago, number 18, Shui Guang Lian Nian. But what I regard as equally, if not more important for the Hong Kong group here, is that we've also been experiencing the growth of our development of Cantonese choral music. What I was shocked to find when I arrived here, expecting that there would be a lot of Cantonese choral pieces that we could perform, after I arrived, I only discovered that there were none, or very few. In fact, the first Cantonese piece we had to perform was written by a Singapore composer. And so we then set about trying to develop new local repertoire that would be done in Cantonese, because of course I felt it was very important for my Cantonese speaking students to have their repertoire that they could also perform. And this would blend Chinese script, Cantonese diction, and bel canto practices. And so we've set about doing some new Cantonese choral initiatives along with other groups around Hong Kong as well that are doing the same thing. And with the Half Moon Rising project, we also commissioned a new Cantonese work by Chen Kaiyong, who's at Chinese University, Sui Diu Go Tao, which is a very famous poem, of course, Under the Mid-Autumn Moon. And this has presented us with some really special opportunities, and they connect directly to what we just saw in some of the other presentations by Teju and by Xiuhua, especially. We are dealing with a lot of specific delivery issues of the text that are similar to what the Indian singer was doing and what the Namyang singer is also doing, although they may be thinking about different things. So what this is doing is it's providing new approaches for international choral music because of the Cantonese. For example, you've got the second and the fifth ascending glide tones in Cantonese that actually most choirs here would see with or without notation. And if they saw the Chinese character, they would do it automatically. They would sing it. But the composers take different approaches for notating it. In this case, you can see that the composer used the Western Baroque approach to have it sung in Cantonese here. Mingyut gei si yao ba da man ting tim. And then also the issues of different vowel sustaining that are different or could be different or the same according to the Western bel canto approach. And then there are also the special presentation of stopped final consonants. You've got your K and your T and your P consonants that are stopped before they're actually sounded there. And this is very unusual for international choral music. And then also some of the NG endings. I saw in the Indian piece there that she was having to do with the NG beginnings here. This is very uncommon for Western choirs there. And so a passage like this, ngo yuk sing feng guai hai, that yuk is a very uncommon thing to do because bel canto focuses on an even flow, continuous flow. So if I was singing this in the Western bel canto approach, I would sing it, ngo yuk sing a feng a guai hai. But of course, that sounds a little bit strange from the Cantonese perspective. So you can see the issues involved in us blending these different techniques as we move on here. Let me just give you a little bit of the beginning of this piece that we premiered also in 2015. The piano is supposed to be imitating a guzheng, in fact, after the beginning starts. And I'm sorry, I'm afraid my embedded video didn't bring out the audio so well for this presentation. These are all available online as well. And this has led now, I really started to lock on to the desire to develop Cantonese choral music because we found some fascinating approaches in terms of practice for the choir, especially with my singers who are all native Cantonese speakers. They all speak differently, we found. Their approaches to the diction are all different. Their consonants the vowels that they use, if you go down the line of sopranos and altos, it would be ming, mang, ming, mang, ming, mang, and ting, 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 all the different approaches there. And so we had to really focus on a great amount of detail in order to try to achieve this, as you can imagine, with so many singers having to align so exactly. And then we approached a very special project in 2019 called the Colla Voce. Colla Voce means together, voices together. 2019 Hey Yut, which of course means to enjoy Cantonese. And we commissioned 5 prominent composers from around Hong Kong to compose sets of new pieces. So we did a 2-hour concert of all new Cantonese choral music, where they would explore Cantonese performance practices in scoring, in diction, in vocal textures, and including mixed voices and an ensemble of Chinese instruments. And we plan more of these. So this has led us to a new level of questions for underpinning research in Chinese choral practices research. Specifically, under what historical circumstances has choral music been adopted, and how does it represent Chinese and Hong Kong culture nationally and internationally? What are the processes for appropriating and blending Western and Asian musical traditions? How do languages and texts convey national and regional identity in the hybrid repertoire? And how is Chinese choral sound produced from Chinese and Western linguistic, vocal, and musical practices? And let me just run through a cascade of some of the projects that we've been involved with, in which we've added on other strands of practice as research, beginning with our 2012 weekend concert at the National Center for Performing Arts in Beijing, where we presented to an audience of 1,600 Beijingers a concert of new sounds in choral music of China and the world. And we included pieces from North America, from India, from around China, from Africa, etc. And we asked, how does the Hong Kong ensemble represent China and world choral music to the mainland audience? Sorry, I can't see my entire screen here. I'll have to read off the back there. In 2016, we performed a 30-minute segment on BBC Radio 3 in tune of Chinese choral music. And there, as a pathway to impact, we asked, how does the Hong Kong ensemble represent and disseminate Chinese choral music to international audiences? And then in the same year, 2016, we collaborated with the National Youth Choir of Great Britain that was on tour in Asia. And by utilizing the Half Moon Rising project as a pathway to impact, then we addressed how is Chinese choral music adapted for performance by non-Chinese choirs in terms of new repertoires, new contexts for their Asian tours, for UK festivals, for digital recordings. Here, the National Youth Choir of Great Britain was performing and recording Chinese or non-Western music for the first time. And then also in terms of performance practices, how to make it accessible in the Chinese text accessible through our common bel canto technique. So the process I see in the Sat Sat project there of how she's trying to teach her, there are actually, for a lot of the singers who study bel canto music, we've got established ways that are used or that are designed to assist with that process. One of them is what I did with the Half Moon Rising project. I provided the pronunciation guides that are up online that all of the, you can download for free, in which we provide the Chinese, we provide the pinyin romanization, and then we have the International Phonetic Alphabet. We've got the dumb translation word for word, and then we've got the poetic translation, along with audio pronunciation guides here that where she's actually pronouncing fast and slow in the different approaches here. Sorry, I can't turn this off. And so these are ways to try to make them accessible to different people around the world. So when the National Youth Choir came to Hong Kong, then we did a program of Chinese pieces here. In this case, we did here's a work of a Yunnan folk song arranged by a Taiwanese composer, Xiao He Tang Shui, a very famous folk song in the mainland here. And you can hear the folk elements of the folk song, Yue Liang Chu Lai Liang Wang Wang Liang Wang Wang. But they're going to be a heavy bel canto sound because all of the British singers are all heavily trained in the bel canto here. This is what it sounds like. And as you can imagine, then both Cantonese and Mandarin are going to present a lot of new consonants and new vowels for these international choirs. And for them, it's really exciting. It's fun for them to be able to branch out from what they're normally using in German and French and English and Latin. And then in Hong Kong, we performed at the Hong Kong Arts Festival with a number of collaborators here in the Hong Kong Odyssey, where we asked how Hong Kong multiculturalism is represented and staged in terms of different histories, disciplines, media, and texts and languages involving English, Mandarin, and Cantonese. It was a multimedia production with video, orchestra, Chinese instruments and singers, Namyang singers involved, opera singers, and then there we are crouched in the little orchestra pit just in front of the stage there. And then we've also started branching out into other aspects of choral theater with the Arts Festival in 2018 and the Suppliant Women, asking how contemporary choral theater transcends cultural differences in the performance of reconstructed Greek drama, where we were the first non-English speaking group then to perform from the British stage production here. And that's been, we're continuing to expand and exploring possibilities of doing it in Chinese translations as well. And then most recently, our recording of 2018 in Bangkok, and then released in 2020 of Quotation of Queries, our CD release. And you can see our perspective from just next to Lion Rock at HKBU, but with a different vantage point where we're singing in Mandarin, in English, Greek, in German, in French, Cantonese, and in Brazilian Portuguese. And so to finish off here, this is leading us to another level of practice as research questions involving how do texts of the ancient world find meaning through the music of our contemporary life in the 21st century? How do these traditions mix and merge on a contemporary choral platform? And especially, how are the tonal Chinese languages of Mandarin and Cantonese enunciated chorally alongside non-tonal Western languages? Other questions that come up as well, but I'll look forward to talking about some of these things in our discussion that will follow now. Thank you very much.